Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. I've got Josh Halliday here, and he is training superintelligence with frontier data at Turing. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Stuart. Great to be here. Excited to have a conversation with you today.
And we were just talking about RL environments, and I realized that I don't really know what an RL environment is. I know it stands for reinforcement learning environment, and you've been doing this for a really long time. Can you share more what it is and how you got involved in this?
Yeah, of course. It kind of ties nicely, actually. So I kind of first got into AI training data around 5, 6 years ago. I was working at a company called Unity Technologies. You might be very familiar with them as like one of the gaming engines for 2D, 3D games. But I was actually working on the industrial side. So we were working with enterprise organizations, and we were building out a function for them essentially to generate simulated data where real world data couldn't fill, let's say, edge cases. This was kind of early on. So we were using this real time 3D gaming engine with, physics embedded in it. And let's say we were working with like an oil and gas company, and they would come to us and they say, look, we've got this real world data set. There's certain situations or scenarios where it might be potentially hazardous for us to actually collect the data, but we need that data in case, there's an accident, and we need our vision model to be able to predict what the outcome of that might be. So what we would do then is, based on a scope, we would generate a 3D environment. So let's say like a construction site. And then we would have assets as well. So an asset could be like a person or a industrial vehicle, and we would create many different types of scenarios with many different variables in it to try and capture as much data as we could. And that was like the core idea behind it. And that was a very simple use case. It went so much deeper. We were talking with space intelligence companies that were building solutions like autonomous rendezvous and docking for satellites in space. And, how do you collect data for that? Well, you actually have to have a launch, and you have to go up and collect the data. But what they're kind of looking for out there is space debris, which is essentially, when you're looking at an image, only really represented by a pixel. It's a tiny little thing. So as you can have a launch, you can collect some data, but it might not necessarily even have the full breadth of what you need. So we were helping move from Blender pipelines into the Unity engine, which was real-time 3D.
Wow.
What's kind of funny about the other side of what I was doing was also supporting machine learning agents into the Unity engine. So they go on a Python wrapper, then go into the Unity engine, and they would be trained on like a 2D game, let's say. So it's reinforcement learning. So every time that the agent gets the game wrong, it goes back to the beginning. It learns from its previous mistake with reward modeling, and eventually it becomes very, very good at the game. This was like still very early days, and it was more just experimental than anything. But for me, it was just super interesting to be involved in that world. And it felt like very forward thinking at the time. It felt like we were really onto something. Sorry, Stuart.
What year was it?
This was just after the end of the COVID year, and beginning of 2021 kind of time. So about 4 years ago now, just over.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had issues like, back then when we were generating the synthetic data, that we had issues with fidelity of the renders. We had issues with the physics, unrealistic physics, essentially. So we had like several different challenges that are now much more mature when I look at, the kind of companies that are providing this service. Impressive how far the leap has come. And I think obviously that's across the whole of AI, but specifically as I had an insight into the kind of earlier workings of these kind of solutions.
It's so crazy because it's at a game company, and I want to talk more about game companies. The whole bunch of interesting stuff there. You're talking about space debris. I actually did an interview 2 days ago with a company called Orbital Robotics, and they're building robotics in orbit to try to fix satellites in space. And he was giving me the whole lowdown on exactly what you just said, which is right, which is like space debris is really, really tiny, and it's a really big problem because if it and that's why they have to like move the spacecraft up there out of the way in case they detect something, and it's really hard to detect, and all these different things. So that's one thing we could talk about. but I want to kind of, and it's a gaming company, Unity, or it's a gaming environment company, and that's like, this is why the simulation theory gets so much talk, is because the games are like reality in some ways, and so, and we're now training AIs, and where were the best AIs in 2001, 2002, StarCraft, right? Like that's where the best AIs were, and then you had humans trying to beat the AIs, and then the AIs got really good at games. And actually, yeah, can we start there? Can we start like why Deep Blue and why Go? Why were those the games that, or why is gaming so important to AI, and like going into today as well?
Yeah, I think I guess there's like a few reasons really. Like gaming represents essentially a replica of the physical world, right, that
Yeah,
we live in.
interesting. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and there's some companies actually that are exploring this a lot more. If you know General Intuition or
No.
World Labs AI,
Okay.
both super cool companies that you should definitely check out. But essentially, what their theory is that gaming engines, simulation, physics, all is like super beneficial
Yeah.
for all different kinds of applications of AI. For real world use cases that we can scale up. Because we've got projects ongoing where we're collecting real world raw data, but it's time intensive, it's cost intensive, and there's got to be a way to scale that up, and I think the gaming engine is where that is. And now that we're at a point where the fidelity is much better, we have like very mature ray tracing engines, path tracing engines.
Wait, can
I
you
think
go
this
into
is
those? What do those do? What is ray tracing, and what was the other one?
Yeah, path tracing. They basically mimic reflections of light or paths of light that are, so like if, let's say, for example, if you're looking at a vehicle, has it got reflections from sunlight on the vehicle? If it doesn't, then that's not reflecting actual real world data. And that can confuse the model. That's the problem. The model could get confused, and if it's like a high stakes environment, then obviously, it's not going to be good enough, is it? So the simulations need to be very very high fidelity, and there's a company called Anyverse that do this really well. They use what's called hyperspectral fidelity, and that's essentially compressing waves against the pixel of the image, so you get this super beautiful realistic looking render. And so it's people are doing great things there.
And okay, and so the basic thing is that we've got this physical world. It's crazy because it goes back to sort of philosophy and the Greeks, right? Because like Pythagoras tried all this math stuff, and he was like on his mystical trips where he was like the world is rational, and we got music, and music makes up the world, and you got Plato and Aristotle all kind of creating these forms, and just like geometry, and like all this stuff going on in history about what the world is, what the physical world is like. And then you got the European Enlightenment, which is totally like puts all of that on overcharge and actually like matches it against the real world, and like finds out all this math of like, oh, this is actually how the real world works. And we got physics, and we got geometry, we got all these different things. And
Right.
now we're in this really philosophically rich area because we're now designing artificial minds. And we're trying to give those artificial minds synthetic data, which is what you've been talking about. And we're doing it through creating simulated worlds. And then, go for it. What do you think?
No, I was just going to say, like, something else that leads really nicely into this is what the engine was being used for back then was essentially for like visual prototyping with virtual reality. So they would use CAD models, and they would ingest it in the Unity engine and be able to simulate it in virtual reality alongside, let's say, like an entire department, and they could all prototype and work with this CAD model, which is technically very accurate in its specifications. But what I'm seeing now a lot of is in the robotics field, is remote teleop with virtual reality. So we found, like, again, a really great use case for virtual reality to train these robots. You have people
because the guys who are operating that are inside of a virtual reality system.
Right. So you could have a workforce in, let's say, the Philippines with virtual reality headsets remotely operating humanoid robots across the globe, teaching them how to do reinforcement learning and
wow. Do you know? So, and that's so interesting because I never put it together. I never tried to put myself in the shoes of the person operating that and how they must have gotten connected with it. So, with the Tesla robot, the people who are operating it, they
Mm.
put on a VR headset. And are they using like Unity, or are they using some sort of proprietary virtual reality? And what are they? Are they seeing like a one-to-one copy of the world that they're supposed to be inside of?
Yeah, I mean, technically, I wouldn't be able to let you know about the stack. I mean, I should
Yeah.
imagine Unity and Unreal Engine are a big part of many of those stacks, as well as some of the NVIDIA suite as well. There's like quite a few options these days of where people could go, but I think Unity is great for experimentation, maybe like less of a deep dive technology platform than, let's say, Unreal Engine. So a lot of people use it for R&D, these kind of experimentations, but
Mm.
uh, yeah, I think like I don't know if you saw 1X, the robotics company, they released Neo. It's just this humanoid robot that everyone got really excited about. And, part of the interview was he was saying like, you have to be okay with once you purchase this robot and it's in your home,
Yeah.
there will be someone teleoperating this robot, to learn your environment, the house, because they're not autonomous enough to be able to do that themselves. And we saw some funny videos of them trying to load and unload the dishwasher, and it looked like they'd sank 15 beers or something, and they were just crashing.
So I mean, but that's just a matter of time, right? This is just like a jump step to once we get enough training data, once they've mapped out the entire world, then we don't need the teleoperator thing. What do you think of that? Do you think that that's like a 1 year thing, a 5 year thing, a 20 year thing?
Yeah, I mean, considering where it was 5 years ago when I started in this space to now, the exponential
Yeah.
climb of this technology is as it goes by so fast that actually it's genuinely hard to keep up with all the information because there's a new state of the art model being released like every other week, and there are these new technologies that are coming out. So I don't know. I would say within the next year or two, we'll have probably a few significant breakthroughs with uh, remote haptic technology
Oh,
and
dick.
yeah. There's another company I can't remember their name, but they're just mentioning that they've releasing this haptic mitt, this sensory haptic mitt. It looks super interesting, man. This is like real big innovations that are happening in this space, and I want to just bet heavily on robotics in general. I think it's
Yeah.
gonna go into overdrive the next few years. Um,
It's just, and it's so crazy coming from Silicon Valley where, last 20 years, I probably came aware of it in like my 20s, where people were talking about the singularity and this acceleration that was coming. But then a lot of them are kind of, off the wall. I'm pretty off the wall too. So there's nothing wrong with that basically. But like, it's just hard to know what's real or not because there's so much fantasy, there's so much sci-fi in the philosophy, and then there's so much just weird stuff that didn't really happen the way they said, but then there's a lot of weird stuff that did really happen. And it's
right.
like it feels like so it's like over the past, I started getting into AI at this company in 2023, and it's 2 years later now, and just tracking it, and now I'm building applications that I've never would have been able to build before, and I'm building like real physical hardware stuff like this. I got my Seed Studio ESP32 here, and it's like a voice agent. So I'm going to build my own Alexa version of Alexa.
Nice.
Very very close to getting it. I think it did actually hear my speech. But so like that I was not expecting to do that a year ago, let alone 5 months ago. Like the idea kind of came into my head 5 months ago, and like 5 years ago, if you told me that I was doing that, I would be like, what, taking a lot of psychedelics there. Um,
Listen, I think like with apps like Lovable, yeah, I think everyone should be at least trying their hand in building applications. And, I would always encourage anyone of any age to try and get into it. And one of my colleagues, actually, he was telling me something amazing. He started a small company with his two little kids. They vibe coded this website. It's like mini vending machines. And, these kids are like pulling in 10 grand revenue a year already at the age of 7 or 8 years old. They built their own app. Like, you can just do things now.
yeah,
I
yeah,
know people love to say that, but like it's true. Like and I've been experimenting a little bit. I'm a busy guy. I've got three little kids, so you can imagine my
uh-huh.
life. In between also being a musician and working my job, it's difficult for me to find the time. But I'm trying this year. One of my resolutions is to try and build like a fully functioning working app and try and see if we can create something out of that. I
Very
think that's,
cool.
yeah.
Well, let me. I can hopefully share some information right now that will help. Have you tried Claude Code, or have you tried Google Anti Gravity or Codex in the terminal?
No, I have not, but
Yeah.
definitely on the
Those
list.
those are the key things. The anti-gravity is really interesting. Anti-gravity is an IDE. I was expecting, because I'm now building full applications using Claude Code and
Nice.
OpenAI Codex, and those are inside the terminal. And all you do is you speak in natural language, and because it's constrained inside the terminal, has full access to your computer, which is interesting. But and then I got a Raspberry Pi, and then I put Claude Code on the terminal in the Raspberry Pi, and now it's going and doing all the stuff that I would have had to figure out how to navigate Linux on my own.
Right.
So it's just like, so it's a really easy way. And then Google came out. I was expecting them to release a product inside the terminal because it's so useful. It's so clearly all the developers are going to start using these tools. And you got Cursor and you got Lovable, and those are more consumer apps. And so I was thinking Google, obviously, with that big announcement they did 3 weeks, they're going to go compete with Codex and Claude Code. They did not, in fact, do that, which might make sense. They actually built an agentic version of Cursor, and Cursor has now copied this today. They just released a copy of because Google came in and started competing against Cursor and against Lovable and against all these things with a very unique, very hard to wrap my head around agentic architecture, so that you can, it's almost like StarCraft. And I've imagined the UI. Oh, that's interesting, because the UI is going to start going into games now, and it probably will look like StarCraft. And we probably will, because like right now it's all text based, right? It's like, so with Google Anti-Gravity, you're just having text based conversations with the agents, and it goes and does stuff, comes back, does stuff, and you can have a conversation with 25 different agents. And as long as you can hold the state of your entire application here, then you can go off and send. And now I just got the idea based on this conversation that it might very much look like a video game. Like we might actually start going into virtual worlds like those teleoperators and going and like sending off agents that look like humans or dwarves or elves or something like that. Man, it's going to get really weird. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this was like maybe edging towards the kind of metaverse concept that Mark Zuckerberg was trying to push, a few years back. But obviously his was more around like social engagement rather than like actual enterprise working environments. I think, really, to be honest, like that's where Meta gets most of their revenue from, right there. So I think it's converging into multi-connected 3D environments that facilitate virtual collaboration, testing, training in simulated environments. And in the next 5 years, I imagine we will be like somewhere that we would struggle to comprehend, maybe even currently. I think
that's the whole singularity theory from my perspective, is that like once you're outside of it, it's hard to get into it. But it's almost like science does that itself in general, because science, right, to the point where it is right now, there are these little paradigms of science that are incomprehensible to people outside. And there's like 5 or 6 people who are in that little burrowed in. And it's not only in science too, it's somebody like you who has this expert knowledge of these RL environments. You have a whole vocabulary that you've built up, and you've got, several other people in different companies, but now it's like that for everything. Right. So it's like so this is interesting. It's like AGI, it all depends on whether this thing replaces us or whether we need to collaborate with it. I think we'll need to collaborate with it. I don't think it'll replace us. What do you think?
So actually, this will take me quite nicely into discussing RL environments, because at the moment, like what everyone needs is real world workflows, right? And so when we're thinking of an RL environment, it's essentially, again, a simulation of an enterprise application or a consumer app. So let's take an example, right? Salesforce is a tool with a lot of different features in it. So obviously to replicate something like Salesforce completely in its entirety would be ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
But what we want to do is to simulate different real world tasks that someone might carry out on that tool and alongside a multi-tool stack. Okay. So how we build out these environments, let's keep the Salesforce example. We'll bring in subject matter experts. they will help design the workflows. So for example, on Salesforce, that could be something like update an opportunity to stage 2, fill out the required fields in order to move to that step. That might be the workflow as a very basic example. So what we would have is the prompt that tells it what to do, and then we would have the verifier, which is a script that lets us know how well the agent has done the task. And what we're trying to do is essentially replicate a role, a function in a certain industry, right? So that could be like a chief marketing officer of a fintech company. Let's say, for example, we might want to target that vertical in particular. So we would build out an environment or a gym around those kind of specific use cases. And then the agent will carry out the task. If it fails, it will give us a read report why. It will try the task again, and then it will let us know. Essentially, the metric would be, what does it pass at? Is it 8 times? Is it 10 times? That's the kind of metric everyone's benchmarking against now. And then you can imagine like that needs to be scaled up across lots of different tools, across lots of different workflows, industry types. And I think, we're then moving away from, let's say, simulating one workflow to actually what would a company-wide simulation look like? What would a Morgan Stanley look like? If we had agents filling every role of that company, carrying out and generating that data, what kind of data do we get out of that? And is it good enough to help move the needle on these models?
Really interesting. Okay.
I don't want to be like, they're going to replace us. I think it's like, it's more like, it's going to take a while for it even to be able to get to the point where it could replicate an expert in their role, realistically, let's say.
But even when that does happen, I still don't think it replaces us, right? Because it's like a company solves a problem. You have these large companies, and these large companies kind of conglomerate in order to solve a lot of different problems. Here, the Ronald Coase, there's like a crazy economist who talks about coordination costs. And he says the function, why isn't there just one company that does everything? And there's not one company because basically there's just so many different problems. And I might be misquoting this, but it's just like there's so many different problems that you need specialization from these different companies. And there's some sort of medium where they like exist, where they do go for the monopoly, but then things change. And so they lose the monopoly. And so like, I just think there are so many problems in the real world that we can't even see yet because we are blinded by the immediate daily problems. And it's just like the history is just like one long chain of really intense problems of like, oh, we got horses now. It took them like 1,000 years to build a stirrup. Like, and that solves like one problem, right? And there's just like, there's tons of problems out there like that, like going to space and everything like that. And I think it comes down to, actually, there's a great question for you. I think it comes down to will, right? These agents, no matter what, it doesn't seem like they have will or autonomy or anything else. Like we have to give them the instructions, right? But maybe it's like automation where it's like, once we know all these different things, we'll just be able to give them the instructions. But then if something goes wrong, can they fix it? What's your theory on that? Like all those different things of agency and will and like, yeah.
Yeah. I think, the agent is being told to do a particular task. It's trained on a particular task. They're quite specialized right now. Like when it gets to a point where they're more autonomous to carry out tasks across like a wider breadth of use cases, I think we'll see that soon. We can see strong capabilities across complex multi-tool workflows right now. We're seeing good results with those agents, but I think like full autonomy of them is still some way off. It's really hard to tell like where everything is moving because things are moving so fast. And we're lucky where we are because we work with the labs, and when you have the privilege of working with them, you get the insight into kind of where the frontier edge of this research is going.
And how are you feeling philosophically about what is happening? Like, how is it changing your worldview?
Yeah, it's the change is dramatic. I think there's obviously the kind of existential threat of bad actors manipulating technology for nefarious reasons, and that is, I think, a big concern. But I also think that like it's already given the world access to information that they would never have been able to have before, and I think there's just so many really inspiring use cases for this technology. To help people with treating disease, helping with climate action. These are the kind of use cases where I think like we're really going to benefit humanity as a whole rather than, and then you see like, some of these like really cheap chatbots that are like pseudo dangerous territory. I've seen someone that's like, speak to strict parents or speak to this celebrity. And I just think those kind of uses of the technology, like, yeah, it kind of makes you lose a little bit of hope, but there are great things happening out there. And yeah, I've even been involved with some projects myself where like you really do feel like there's a real great benefit to what they're doing, what they're building and what they're doing. So I embrace it. I would always encourage like my kids and everyone else to embrace it and find out how you can use it without being over reliant and still having your input, your judgment on, what is right and what you think is the best way to use this technology. I think it requires careful approach and sensible adoption.
Okay. I love this point on, I do want to go back to RL environments, but this actually probably connect it to because what you just said about dependencies, right? All of us are building a dependency on this technology, really useful technology. But then if I were to take it away, I would not be able to, like if tomorrow I lost access to all LLMs for a year, I would stop this project. I would just not be able to do this project. And
Right.
so there's just like a cold stop, like, no, maybe I could go and research in libraries, but it's like there's so much complexity that it's been able to get me to navigate. How do we teach kids how to do it? And I like one historian, Neil Ferguson, he said, time to bring back the cloister or the time to lock people inside of a room with no technology for like 7 hours at a time
Right.
and teach them the skills that, and I think that's a good idea. I think his particular, I can't remember his particular thing. Like, I think that was a little too far because we want both, right? We want not to get outside the singularity, can't be useful inside the singularity using these tools, but we also want to like actually preserve some of the brain in terms of not having these tools. It's like writing though, right? Because this is the same thing that Socrates and Plato were arguing about. Socrates didn't like the fact that writing was invented, and he's right. His things were right. Like like the dependency on writing has changed our brains in ways that, like, those people that didn't have writing were able to operate environments that we can't operate in because of this.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you know what? Funny point as well. Like I've done some data collection tasks for very rare long tail Aboriginal languages where they're very resistant to actually write the language down, use a computer because they're like, yeah, just culturally very apprehensive of the technology. And so it just kind of made me laugh when you said that, Socrates didn't like the invention of writing. You can see like those kind of mindsets still.
Yeah. And for good reason, like, right? Like, I mean, like those Aborigines might actually be onto something. There might be something detrimental about the technology, but going back to what we were talking about earlier, it's just like, well, but we're here now, and we can't deal with anything outside of what's already existing, like what's in our faces, and like we got to like figure that out. And you can be a Luddite, and a lot of people are going to be Luddites, and a lot of people are going to go off into nature and live in nature and stuff. I've tried that; it's pretty hard. Yeah. So I want to like Aboriginal data, long tail data collection tasks with Aboriginal languages. What did you learn from that one?
That cultures approach and are apprehensive of AI for many different reasons. And
was this recent? Is this recent? Something recently?
Years ago, but I've also done different kinds of collections actually where they're in a physical space and we need to record them, let's say like, for example, inside a vehicle. But certain demographics are very apprehensive about the whole like being recorded and having that data used and what that means, and the AI, like it's culturally not as embraced. And that's why a lot of these companies need that kind of data because they don't have the diversity and
interesting.
If it's a team of all Caucasian or all Southeast Asian men or females, like they don't have that diversity in the data. If they're building a vision based product, super important because then it's going to be biased, right? And it's
Wow.
So yeah, so this kind of thing is like so important, and that goes down to even like obtaining data from children. Like that's super hard
Yeah.
to get, but in, let's say for example in the UK, like you can obtain that data if you get consent, from the parents, is GDPR compliant, and people use that for different things like biometrics, of the eyes. They use it for safety inside the vehicle, so yeah, finding and then, from what the vendor side, you've then got to find these people.
Yeah.
We did a project in Exeter, uh, which is like 98% Caucasian, and we needed to find Southeast Asian women over the age of 60. So you,
Why in Exeter?
because that's where we let's say we
Did
logistically it
the
makes most sense
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah, okay.
run an
Got it.
initial test set of data before we moved it. Actually, Birmingham is a very good place to collect data because it's right near a university. It's got a
Uh,
very broad demographic spread. So, yeah, it's very good actually for collecting raw data up there. But we did this in Exeter, and we had this problem because we couldn't find any people that age of that ethnic background, right? So we managed to find a way by going into Southeast Asian takeaways and putting up posters that said, you can get paid to help support build technology that could save the life of someone of your background, something like this.
Whoa.
And then we get them in, they record the data, they get paid very well for that, and it provides very valuable insights and data
Uh,
to train the model for the end client.
okay, that gives me a whole other interesting path because you're doing this stuff RL environments, which is something I'm not familiar with. I did encounter the project at the company I worked for where they were just at the very beginning stages of this in 2023.
Right.
I'm sure it's advanced like crazy. But you just mentioned something which is I think what all the companies are trying to do. Actually, this is great. Is it true that the main bottleneck right now is high quality data for training these things, or is it energy? What would you think is the major bottleneck for AI research? Is it high quality data from human beings like we've been discussing, or is it energy?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's got to be high quality data, and we know that because a few years ago, companies were trading on, like, they were taking the approach of the quality is important, but not as important as getting the scale and the amount
Yeah,
of data
yeah,
we need.
yeah, yeah,
And it literally pivoted completely
yeah,
180.
yeah,
And
yeah.
everyone's
All
now
the scale is over. All the scale is done. Right?
like it's how could you get much more value out of a very high quality smaller data set than you would
Yeah,
out of a generalized broad,
yeah, 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 yeah.
right? And obviously, if you're getting, let's say, like a senior health professional to evaluate your data, like their time isn't cheap. So, you
Yeah,
know, you have to try and make the most of, the costings, the time, the quality, and try and condense that into where it makes most sense. Um,
yeah, that's super interesting. So the high quality data is now the bottleneck, and this is the
yeah,
crazy thing. Yeah, go for it.
yeah. No, I was just going to say, yeah. I mean, I think it is, and the data is your moat. It's
Yeah,
like the foundation of everything that you're going to be building,
but
and yeah.
what is data? Like the philosophically, data is such an interesting point because for the past like 30 years, everybody's like, big data, data is the new oil. But oil is tangible, right? You put the oil, you refine it, it comes out as petroleum. You now have that to run your car. Like that's
Right.
really easy to understand. Data is not easy to understand because it's basically infinite, right? Like what is your perception of data?
Yeah, data is everywhere, and this
Yeah.
is exactly what's really interesting about human children when they're growing up and they're learning. They're basically ingesting petabytes of
Yeah.
data constantly. And the problem that they're finding is that the machines aren't learning like people. They're learning like machines because they're being given a big corpus of data. It's being fine-tuned slightly. So now what some of the labs are doing is sourcing this first person perspective style data of like different
Is that egoic data? Is that what egoic data is? I heard the term egoic data.
I've not heard that
Yeah.
actually. Heard that, but yeah, I mean the idea being that like you collect petabytes of this data and you train the model on it so it learns as a human would, and we're going to see how that affects the quality, the output of the model.
Hmm.
It's hard to
So
again to obtain. No, it's different. It's not easy to obtain because that person has to make a commitment to have a recording device on them for like
whoa,
long
interesting.
long periods of time, you know, strapped
This
to the
is
head, strapped to, you can also do them where it's like third person perspective and, yeah, all
is
different
that really going
sorts.
on right now? Are people getting paid to life log right now? Wow, interesting.
Absolutely, absolutely are. And this is why I think like eventually one of the biggest jobs in the world is going to be AI training AI with data, like, whether that's like data acquisition, traditional categorization, labeling, preference optimization, evals. Uh, I think it's going to be one of the big, and
That
actually
is
it's
because
given.
yeah,
Sorry, just a last point on that. Like, it's already given a lot of opportunities to people in decentralized regions of the world that already don't have access to that, and
yeah.
the talent is the opportunities are centralized, but the talent's decentralized, right?
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's definitely changing things, and I think like as the technology evolves, the world of work is evolving with it, and for a lot of people who maybe let's say don't have opportunities or can't leave the house very easily, it offers a very good way of making a living.
This is super interesting. So let's narrow it in on this point because there's two different jobs I think that I just recognized there. Two categories of different jobs. There's one which is the engineer who does all the things that you were just talking about data acquisition, preference optimization, who can kind of like figure out what's that camera is doing and help somebody like lifelog and like fix something if something breaks. And then there's the person wearing it or the person going and generating the data and other things like that. And you're exactly right that like it's decentralized. Both of those jobs are now decentralized. I'm down in Argentina. A huge reason I came here was because there were a huge amount of Argentines who helped do all the RLHF for those early models in
Right,
2022,
right.
2023. A lot of
Mm.
them were Argentine. And it's partly because of cost, because Argentina at that time was much cheaper, partly because of Argentine creativity and education and all these different things. Um, so, what do you think about the engineering side? Preference optimization and data acquisition feels like that's going to become an important engineering role inside of corporations, right?
Yeah, I mean, data acquisition generally refers to like either collecting raw data or generating data like via an LLM. So it could
Mm,
be either, and we're doing, and again, this is like, this has matured a lot. So again, like a few years ago, when we were thinking about data generation, that was very simple. Like, again, similar to like, we would get, let's say, an image or two models. One of them, both of them would generate an image, and then you choose which one looks better and why. That's basically preference optimization, or which answer out of A to D scores the best. Um, but yeah, it started off being very unspecialized and like it was more about does this look good or not. And now it's very much like we need someone with very specific, narrow knowledge to come in and tell us whether or not this is right, what's the
yeah.
best option. And evals, everyone's doing evals at the minute. Evals are like, yeah, the big benchmarking and hill climbing evaluations are huge at the moment. And they're proving to be a really good way of training models. And I'll give you some examples. Like there's a SweBench, open source data set that's used for companies to benchmark their coding models, essentially. But obviously that data only goes so far and is only really so difficult. So what we're investing a lot of time and money into at the moment is developing our own private repos with very, very complicated coding tasks in it. So yeah, model breaking tasks that we can use to help benchmark against the state of the art models, then provide detailed feedback and analysis on where the gaps were and maybe where you could improve. So
Mm,
that's like a lot of what the frontier kind of data movement is at the moment. More off
mm.
the shelf benchmarking data sets.
Now, you mentioned verifier, and going back to that RL environment, the verifier sounded really interesting because it's like you need a subject matter expert
Mm.
to verify it. You need a human in the loop to
Mm.
verify the quality of the data. And this is the crazy thing about quantity versus quality, because we have a sort of religion called scientism, which says like you can only things that are important are the things that are measurable. And I have found this to be false, because quantitative, while important, modeling, all these things are really important, but they're not like when you get down to reality. I think you're dealing with a subjective human layer, and if it's perceived by a human, it's
Right.
subjective and it's qualitative, and and like subject matter experts are people who have spent a significant amount of time tinkering, passion, all these talking, finding out what's the true part about their job, and that's what
Mm,
gives them the ability to say whether it's quality or not. And that's just qualitative. You can put a number on it, you can put a 0 or 1 on it, you can make it binary, you can just tell them to give me a yes or no answer, is this quality or not? But that like
mm.
cuts out a huge amount of the truth of what's going into it. And
Ex-
knowledge is this thing. What do you think of everything I said?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I totally agree. Like, I think the human expert is providing like, yeah, qualitative and quantitative, because obviously, the context of the insight is what the most valuable data is. It's not
Mm.
yes or no. It's like where's why, the whys and the hows. And what I will say is though is like, you could have subject matter experts. Another challenge is like, how do you get the right ones for the task?
Yeah.
That's a whole other story, because you could rope in, someone with like mid-level health clinical experience, but it doesn't mean they're going to be the right person. And even if they are the right person, how do you keep that person? That's another big challenge, is
Uh,
retaining the talent. Like
yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
huge industry problem. And we find that like right person, right tools, right environment, right training, like you'll get the quality, and treat them well, compensate them well for their time, make them collaborate well with each other, create guilds, create partnerships, constant communication, um, and yeah, extra incentives and rewards tied to the overall quality. And then you start to find that actually the talent stays, the quality of the data gets better over time. They get better at what they're doing over time because they've got consistent work. Again, it's like a lot of people would join a company as a data annotator and the work isn't consistent,
Yep. Yep.
problem for them because they need the income. And if they can't get it guaranteed or they don't have that constant workflow, then it's difficult for them.
And now the data is the main, data quality is the main bottleneck. You're not dealing with people who can find or who can't find work other places, right? You're dealing with subject matter experts in places where the data is actually already really important, right? Like that's one of the key problems.
Yeah, this is why there's some companies that are kind of pushing the idea of like, you can you can find annotators that are also doing taxi rides or they're also doing
Yeah,
DoorDash
yeah,
deliveries.
Uber.
And
Yeah, yeah,
why would you want those guys doing while working on your data? Like they're
yeah,
clearly not fully invested in it. Like you want people that are like career-based data people. That's what you need. Like the era of this generalized annotation is very swiftly coming to an end, outside of certain specific use cases. And it's very much like find the person that's got this experience that will be able to impart specific wisdom or knowledge, and that's what we're doing. We're basically giving wisdom from these
yeah.
experts into the LLM.
Trying to make implicit knowledge something that they have inside of their heads and try to basically formulate that in a way that a machine can understand, right?
That's right. And also like new knowledge is formed every single day. So I think like the need for this kind of data is not going away anytime soon. It's ongoing as new things are discovered, new studies are done. It's all new data, and data gets old quickly as well. I'll say that like it can be useful, and then after unless you've got a cross-functional purpose for it, it gets old. It needs to be updated. It needs iterating on, plugging edge cases, finding out new avenues to explore. So yeah, it's a great time to be in the industry. It's like a very exciting industry to be in. I have to say, like I'm really passionate about what we do, and the projects that we do are so interesting, so much fun to deliver. So yeah, I absolutely love it. I think it's definitely like the future of work for sure.
So, last 5 to 10 minutes, I want to kind of dial into how I can start getting some of this experience as an outsider of like an RL environment. I saw somebody on Twitter and I saved it, built an RL environment. But I find that just reading these things isn't as helpful as talking to people. Is there any sort of like open source or even a closed source paid company where I can, I mean, do I just use Unity or how do I build an RL environment? And is that even the right question? Like, Is that, and my goal is to, yeah.
Yeah, I will say building these environments is a big uplift in engineering effort. You know, it requires,
Interesting.
yeah, it's not simple. I mean, when you think about creating maybe like a super simple one task sandbox environment of Jira or even DoorDash or something like that, or like Uber Eats, you know, but then you can build it,
Because
but
you
then
build the whole UI, you have to build the whole UI
we
basically,
build the
right?
whole UI, or we do non-UI as RL gyms as well. So terminal use cases for function calling, essentially. So it could be, let's say Jira, we could have an environment for both UI and non-UI environments, and you could train and test your agent on both of those. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, you know, a lot of people are very interested in generalized computer use agent data as well. So keystrokes, you know, those kind of data points are very interesting to people.
So it's basically like a virtual machine. You can create a virtual machine of a computer and then test it. But then like it's not the right question for me to ask because I don't have any large data sets. There's no like function in me doing it, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be aware of any open source. I mean, I could be very wrong. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I mean, from my knowledge, yeah, I'm not something.
This is a specialized thing for large companies that are have a huge amount of data that they want to basically give this machine ability or give the machine ability to navigate their tasks.
Basically, yes, and generate as much data as possible to build better functions and features.
Yeah, this is so interesting because it's like I'm trying to figure out I'm trying to take all this crazy knowledge and figure out a way to make it not compete at all with the AGI and figure out what are the boundaries at which a human. So this is why I'm doing these things. Is basically and I think it all basically comes down to being local. Like the robots are coming. All the stuff you guys are doing is basically going to allow for the robots to very quickly have all the data that they need in order to navigate the physical world. But I think where the humans come in is basically being able to repair, reuse, repurpose, and extend all of these different things basically. So it's just like being able to fix the robot might be the job that remains, unless the other robots fix the robots. I guess that's yeah.
I think it's all going to be like close human and AI collaboration,
Yeah.
and it's going to constantly be that collaboration there. Like I think even when they're fully autonomous, there's always new environments and scenarios and everything
Yeah,
where
interesting.
it needs to improve. That's what I'm saying. Like it's a cyclical thing, right? There's always different kinds of data that's needed, and I think
Yeah.
full autonomy across every terrain
Very
environment.
long, far away. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think so. But I'm also really interested in like the convergence of biology and AI and what Neuralink is doing. And, you know, I'm very also into like things like topics like remote viewing, you know, like metaphysical topics
Mm.
and the convergence of how might be used with artificial intelligence and all this kind of stuff.
Well, you just opened up a whole new podcast there, because the Butlerian Jihad. But we'll only do a few more minutes. But the Butlerian Jihad, it's just like that. The whole Dune novel is about how the AI got out of control and they needed to shut it down, and then they figured out how to do metaphysical things because we have this sort of ingrained thing. And I talk to people on both sides where it's like that other side is really interesting and potentially powerful, but also like people don't believe in it at the moment because science and technology are so powerful. But we can leave that for another one. Yeah, unless you want to say something. Yeah.
You, man. No, just so good to talk to you, mate. Like, I'm definitely up for doing this again sometimes. Like, feels like we could have gone on for another few hours quite easily. But
Next
yeah,
one
I
is
appreciate
about,
you giving me the opportunity to come on. Thank you.
yeah, no. And are you talking about this? Are you writing about any of your thoughts here?
No, but it's a plan again. Another one for the new year, right? Get it in,
Yeah.
get some content created, and actually like spend some time doing this. It's been a crazy few years, and I'm glad to be at Turing, glad to be doing what I'm doing, and I think like sharing this kind of knowledge, you know, even just based on the kind of reaction you've had, like I think it's definitely worth talking about a bit more, you know, openly. So yeah, for sure, more to come on that.
Thank you so much.